Hi friends, welcome back. I know it's been a little bit since we had our last video, but trust me, I've been working on some great ideas and just working through it. It's just editing takes a long time, a lot longer than I expected, but we're here now, and today I would like to talk to you about
We're the rats.
And of course, today's video will feature my own pet rats. Now, this is the first time I've made a video using this mic with my phone, so we're gonna try our best. We're just gonna wing it here, hope that it's capturing everything right, not too loud, not too quiet. We'll just give this one a shot. I have a little janky setup, okay? It's really not the best. Okay, testing. So first things first, the rats. This is Mr. Wrinkles. He has kind of a long little bit of fur and it's all curly down his back. When you feel him, it makes him feel wrinkly, so hence the name. This here is Richard Rat Boy. Richard is the definition of no thoughts, head empty. And of course we have Rat, short for Rathu. He's a squirrely one. He really likes to explore and doesn't have much patience for being held. So the first question, how did I get into owning pet rats? What got me interested in them? So I actually worked in animal husbandry for 2 years with rats and mice, amongst some other animals. And I never initially saw myself having them as a pet. I am a reptile person. I have a box turtle named Franklin. That's really all I had. And the next pet I saw myself seeing was a dog. So I actually met someone there who became one of my best friends. And this place allowed us to adopt out some of their mice and rats. At the time, there were some mice that we saw, and we both decided to get the mice together, and we bought their cages and setups, and we made enrichment boxes for them. And so I kind of got these mice as almost kind of a trial run to see how I would do with mammals, or just, you know, something other than a reptile, because reptiles are very low maintenance in terms of their care. You don't have to change their boxes out very much. They don't always eat as often, they don't drink as often, they don't get sick as often. There's a lot less you have to worry about with reptiles. So I was like, you know, if I do plan to get a dog one day, or other animals, this might be a good way to see what it's like, because I never grew up with hamsters or anything like that. And so I was kind of terrified of it, but you know, it's like, if my friend's gonna do this with me, we're both gonna learn how to take care of mice, we're both gonna have them, you know, it'll be a good time. So I had the mice for about a year, maybe 2. Mice and rats don't live very long, rodents in general. Their lifespans are about 3 years, and many of them pass on before that. So it started with mice, really, and mice are pretty low maintenance as well. The most important thing with rodents is really just kind of having space. They eat and drink ad libitum, which means you can leave out their food all day, their water all day. They can have as much as they want. They will stop eating when they're full. No. They want to touch the setup. Anyway, after I had mice, I realized how fun they were. I loved watching them run around and play. I loved watching them eat with their little hands. And as I worked with rats more, I realized rats are just bigger versions of mice. I think they're a lot more intelligent. People compare them to pocket puppies. They're like small little dogs with a lot less maintenance. There's a great YouTuber that I liked that I'll put in the description below. She's great at teaching about rats and owning rats for the first time. I believe her name is Emmy, and honestly the rest is history with that. Once I got everything set up for them, after that it was just about getting the rats. I found a great breeder near me as recommended by another friend who had owned rats, and my first set of rats were amazing. I got 4 of them: Domino, Havarti, Algernon, and Zinc. And so yeah, after seeing all of these videos and hearing about all of my friends who had had rats before, it got me so interested in having them. I was like, what a better pet to have right now while I can't have a dog, because I lived in an apartment and I needed something small. Rats seemed like the perfect thing. So I guess the next step is, what did I get to prepare for my rats? Well, I found online someone was selling a double critternation cage, which this is one of the most popular types of cages recommended for pet rats. I wanted something simple. These cages can be pretty expensive. I think they can run about $400 plus. Now this cage is about 2 feet long by about 6 feet tall. Perfect for rats. It can actually hold up to 12 rats. I myself only keep 4 in there. And I found someone selling it online for half the price of what it normally goes for, so I was like, heck yeah, I'll take it. They gave me some of their supplies when I bought it, I use Missouri Food brand, but a lot of people also like Oxbow. I got Missouri because it was a bit cheaper and they come in bigger bags, and it looked very similar to the food that I fed our rats at work, so I was like already familiar with it. Another thing rats need is a lot of enrichment, a lot of toys, huts, hammocks, anything of cardboard, paper towels. They need litter pan. They like fabric, and I also wanted them to have a space for digging. So I replaced the bottom shelf in my Critter Nation cage with a big cement bin and filled it with aspen shavings. It's very important to be careful about what types of bedding you put in their cage, and same with litter. You don't want anything pine unless it's kiln dried, and even then some people might not recommend it. I just went with what most people I know use, which was just aspen shavings. I also use KT bedding, which is the KT is the brand, and it's this big white fluffy bedding. I use that sometimes if I want them to have something softer and to snuggle up in. I also got them some wheels, but my rats anyway, have never really liked to use them. I don't know if they really know how. They could probably be trained to use them, but it's not that big of a deal. I do recommend a angled wheel like this, as it is a lot better on their back. To get wheels that are big enough, that sit vertically and are round like a normal standard running wheel, is a bit more expensive to get it the size you would need to protect their backs. I definitely recommend something like this. I use miniature versions of these wheels at work for our mice, and I also had a smaller version for my own mice. You guys are probably wondering, how did I go about picking my first rats? Well, I knew that I wanted males, because from everything I had learned about males, they're a lot more cuddly, they can be a lot more even-tempered, and as they age, they get a lot calmer. In general, they're not as hyperactive as females, and I knew that since this would be my first set of rats, I wanted something a lot more simple to work with. I didn't want to have super energetic rats and then find myself with not enough time to do anything with them, so I wanted to kind of take it slow and take it easy. Another thing I had considered is that rats in general are very prone to cancers and other ailments as they age. It is just a very common thing for them to get tumors. And for females, if they get tumors in their ovaries or mammaries, it's very common, but the procedures are a lot more invasive and dangerous. Whereas males, if they get them, it's most likely going to be in their testicles, and that is a lot easier to remove down the line if they had to undergo a procedure like that. Also, primarily, I worked with females, and in my experience, the females were a lot more nippy. They had a bit more of a temper, and I just found they were a lot more difficult for me to handle personally, and so I figured while I'm getting used to it, it'd probably be easier to go with males. Also, males are bigger, and I just wanted a big, cute little ball of fluff. So these actually aren't my first set of rats. I actually had 4 before them. My last one just recently passed away. His name was Domino, and I got them from a reputable breeder in my area, recommended to me by a bunch of friends who had also used this breeder. So I trusted them and I gave it a shot. You never truly realize how much sound goes on outside whenever you're trying to make a video. So the important thing about this breeder is that whenever they had the rats, they would raise them from a young age to be able to be handled by children. So I knew that when I was getting my rats, they were going to be well handled and were used to being picked up by people. The other thing I knew is that I wanted all of my males to be litter mates, or at least close together and raised together up until they get weaned from their parents, because I did not want to have to deal with boys that fight very viciously. I wanted them to all get along, because that's the other thing, is males are very territorial, and you have to worry about neutering them if you want them to calm down a bit. I really wanted to try to avoid that, because that's, just another procedure we don't want to have to go through if we don't need to. And I also didn't realistically have the space to separate all of them at the same time to get them neutered. And also, it's just financially a bit difficult to do that. I would have if I had to, but I wanted to try to avoid it as much as I could. Also, with that being said, I wanted them all to be same age, so that way they all kind of grow up together, and that when they go to pass, it would be a natural timeline of them all growing together, and I would be prepared for it.
Mr. Wrinkles!
Now, originally, whenever I had talked to my breeder, I had also wanted to get 2 Rexes and 2 Harleys, but with the timing of them being born and just the turnout of the litters, it didn't really work out that way. Instead, I got 2 rats that were Dumbos. That means they have really big ears. And one that I think was supposed to be a Harley, but was only partly a Harley. And then I had Algernon, who was my albino rat, and I wanted an albino, so that worked out, but he looked kind of like a runt compared to the others. Something wasn't always quite right with him. So that being said, I got my 4 initial rats from this breeder. I couldn't have asked for a better first set of boys for my first time owning rats. Now, I think my breeder did a great job with these rats. When I got them, they were very easy to handle, very even-tempered. The entire time I had them, they never bit me or were aggressive toward me. Even during their juvenile age, when they were kind of tussling and everything, I never felt I had to separate them, never had to go get them neutered. They were all very peaceful, sweet-loving boys. Now, rats have very big personalities. As you get to know them, you get to see more and more how different each of them are. Out of my first 4 rats, I had Domino, Algernon, Zinc, and Havarti. Algernon was very curious. He always wanted to explore things. He didn't really like to be picked up as much, but every now and then, if I took him in my arms and sat with him on the couch, he would be the most likely to sit there and fall asleep. It was kind of like one of those, he didn't really like to admit it. Algernon was also very smart. He was very fast, always the more courageous one, wanting to climb out and jump out of the cage. He would be the first to escape if I had left those doors open all night. Not that I ever did, but as I said, Algernon was a bit of a runt though. He kind of walked a little funny. Nobody else really pointed it out, so I assumed maybe that's just how some rats maybe walk, but he always gave me the feeling that something was slightly a little wrong when he was born, because as I said, he was very small, he kind of runt-ish, but of all of them, he didn't really have any health problems until the end of his life. Now, Havarti was just what I considered my polite gentleman. He would never snatch things from you. He never tried to snatch things from the other rats. Havarti was really sweet. He's very reserved, but also very smart. I feel like out of all of my rats, I would be able to teach him how to do tricks a lot quicker than the others. He would never bite, and even though he didn't really like to be held and he was a bit skittish, if you held him, he would be fine. He wouldn't be aggressive or anything. I considered him quiet because in the beginning it was a lot harder to pinpoint who he really was as a rat. He would never fight the other boys really. He was also a lot more shy. It took a lot longer for him to warm up to me. I consider Algernon and Havarti very close together in their intelligence. They both are very similar in that way and very fast learners. Then there's Zinc. Zinc is a sweetheart. Everybody loved him. He was considered everybody's favorites. As much as we don't like to pick favorites, he just kind of had that draw on people. I called him my malleable rat because I could pick him up and move him however I wanted and he would not be bothered. He had these white little cuffs on his hands that kind of made him look like he was wearing a little sweater. Zinc was a people lover through and through, and he just genuinely loved being around people. He liked to watch us. I think he didn't really enjoy being held per se as much, but he just liked to see us and know we were there. I actually initially got this little basket with a blanket in it for him because he would always try and climb out of the cage, but he was too scared to really go anywhere. I don't think he really liked to explore. I think he again just kind of wanted to see us. So I put this here, and once I did, he kind of stopped doing the jumping out of the cage. He would just climb up, sit, and hang his little hands over the little wall here and just kind of watch. Just kind of watch while I was cooking or just see what's going on. That's all he would do. He was also the easiest to hold. As I said, he didn't really prefer it necessarily, but when it came to holding him, he never really crawled around in your arms as much. He was the one that I always gave to my friends and family to hold when they were wanting to experience what it was like to hold a pet rat for the first time. Zinc was one of those rats that when you looked at him, you just knew there was a soul staring back at you. We got a little escape artist here ourselves, the next Algernon in the making. And then there's Domino, my biggest rat. He weighed over 700 grams. Honestly, he was a bit overweight, but Domino loved food. He was the most food motivated of all of them. You could give him anything and he would just snatch it from you. He would grab those through the bars. If you open the door, he would take it straight from you. That's the thing about a lot of the rats. When I would let them outside of their cage to explore, a lot of them were too curious to be interested in food. But no, Domino would never turn down a meal of any kind. Another thing about Domino is he was kind of a fake tough guy. Like tough on the outside, soft on the inside. In the beginning, I thought he was going to be the dominant one. I thought he was going to be the leader of the pack. And I thought it was funny coincidentally that I named him Domino and he turned out to be very dominant. So I was like, okay, he's settled himself as he's the man of this group. Well, it turned out to not be that way. I found he was a lot more skittish than you would think. He was the hardest one to hold because he just constantly wanted to get out of your hands. As I said, he would never bite, but we didn't really hold him that much unless we had him on a blanket in our arms on the couch. And sometimes he did like those cuddles. But I called him my squeaker because when you go to pick him up, he would just squeak, squeak, squeak. My other rats didn't really squeak hardly at all. He was the one that squeaked over everything. He was so dramatic, so dramatic. Him and Algernon often fought for the place as the big man. Algernon won out. It's funny. Algernon, the smallest little dude, the little runt, he was like, no, you guys are my homies. And so Algernon ended up taking place as the leader, the alpha in the group over Domino. But those two often tussled. Now, my boyfriend was not very interested in rats in the beginning and was very hesitant about us getting them at first, but Domino got him to warm up to all the rats in the long term. It was kind of him and Domino's thing. Domino always knew he can get treats from my boyfriend. My boyfriend loved giving it to him. And it was really because of Domino that I think he finally became an advocate for having pet rats. When in the beginning, I never saw him having any pets, to be honest. So Domino holds a very special place in our hearts. All of them do, really. Now, these new rats I got earlier this year also have their own unique personalities. I rescued them from a family that did not want them anymore. This is Rat, short for Rathu, and he is very curious, very fast. He's also very brave. He is not afraid to be running around the house, exploring things. As you can tell, he does not really like to be held. He does not like having baths. And I'm not confident yet to say whether or not he would bite me, but these rats were also by the same breeders I got my other ones, so I'm mostly confident that they're all just as sweet too. And Rathu is a Harley, so he actually does have the long hair coat I was initially looking for. And this means his hair is going to be very long. Sometimes when they get older, their hair will thin out and start to bald, or they might have skin issues. That's the one problem you may run into with Harleys. But so far, he's not really showing any signs of that. But his hair is very soft. He's one of the softest rats I've had, just because of his coat. Now this is Mr. Wrinkles. He is a curly coat rat, which means he is a Rex. That's what they call it. He's a Rex. Now Mr. Wrinkles is also very curious. He's very skittish, but very curious. Whenever I initially got these rats, I got them because Domino's brothers had passed away and he was the last one left and I didn't want him to be alone. But the first few introductions I had with them, Mr. Wrinkles just wanted to meet him. He just had to see him, would not leave him alone. They were all raised together in a litter by the same breeder, grown up together. So I think Mr. Wrinkles is the dominant one of this pack. It's very clear when he was trying to meet Domino that he was trying to assert himself in that spot. And he was the one that would not leave him alone. I think he was kind of trying to scope him out as a new member, you know? So him and Domino did not get along because, as I said, Domino does not like to admit submission to anyone. Not to me, not to the other rats, nothing. So he would not take that. He grew after a while to learn that he's like, I'm not gonna fight you guys, but you guys better not fight me. Like, just leave me alone. He was kind of very indifferent toward the end of his life. So, and they never really got to be together in the cage or anything, this group and Domino, but they at least got to see each other. And I think that was at least enough connection for them. And then we have Richard Rat Boy. I don't think there's very much going on behind those eyes. He's a sweetheart. He's very snatchy with food, and I think the previous owners fed him through the bars a lot, so he does bite accidentally when trying to get food, but not out of maliciousness or anything, just honestly out of ignorance. I think he's a little special. There's something weird about the way Richard feels when like holding him. I can't really describe it, but he kind of feels like how I imagine holding a wild rat is. I don't know if he's more muscly. He feels a little bit more muscly than the other rats. A lot easier to hold. He's totally chill. He's kind of like Zinc in a way, where he's my new malleable rat, you know. I can hold him however which way. I'm still kind of warming up to all of their personalities, but he seems chill, you know, just a guy hanging out. And I think if I had just had him and Domino together, they would have been fine, because he was just very much, I just want to meet you, see who you are, maybe we can be bros type of rat. And he's really cool for that. I really like these guys. They're very sweet. Overall, my last group of rats were a lot more cowardly. They weren't as open to getting out of the cage and exploring. Something to be aware of with rats is that open space scares them. It's like a natural instinct to think that a bigger animal or predator is going to come after them. So it's important to give them places to hide. My other rats were not very jumpy. They were not very playful. I don't know if it was because they were my first rats and I honestly didn't have as much time to spend with them one-on-one as I would have liked to get them used to all of that in the beginning, but seemed a lot more shy to doing a lot more things. These guys, they're not as scared. They will climb on these walls. They will hop out. They will climb over everything. They will jump. They will run. They are overall a lot less afraid of life, you know. Not to say my other rats were scared of life or anything, but I think they just didn't really know what to do, and they were a lot more cage friendly. Like, they wanted to be in the cage more. The cage was their home, safe space. These guys would be totally glad if they could leave the cage and just crawl around everywhere. So it is kind of nice to see some new changes in that way. And you learn these things, you pick up on these things as you're with these rats even longer, you know. Now, as I said, with my last rats, I didn't have as much time with them as I would have liked to do a lot with them. But one of the things I did when I had them is I built this. So I ended up finding pallet sheets. From my old job, we got boxes and supply runs all the time. So I just took this big white sheet. I don't know how to explain what kind of material it is. It's like a plastic. Think of it like those like cardboard sheets, but it's a plastic, kind of a hard plastic. So I cut it down to be about, I think this is about 2 feet long. So it's about 2 feet by 2 feet. I made walls that were about a foot. No, this is not a foot. I don't remember the dimensions, but basically I made these walls to be tall enough that they could not climb out. And the other great thing I like about this material is I could spray it down and wipe it clean anytime I need to, so it's very reusable. I put Velcro on these walls, and I used more of these pallet pieces that I got. They're corner edges that hold the pallet together. I took those, put Velcro on them, so that way they hold the walls together of this. So that way this could be taken down and put back up with ease. I ended up making this because I found my rats did not like to just crawl around on the floor very much. They were too scared of the big open space. And I also, where I lived at the time, it was very difficult to really have a space on the floor for them anyway. Laying things out all over the ground just made it really difficult to clean up. I was worried about them climbing all over the couch and getting it dirty, or trying to climb under things that I couldn't get them out of. So I built this so that way I could put a bunch of things in it for them and they could explore and have a playpen. And also, at the time, my last rats did not climb out of these things. They could not reach it. They, as I said, were a lot more scared to get out. I could leave them there for hours, honestly, and not have to worry about them escaping. These guys have to be supervised. I honestly wish I had taller walls for them, because they want to try and jump out all the time. They always find a way somehow. This playpen has honestly been very budget friendly and worked very well for what I needed it for, with the exception of these little escape artists. And what do I put in this playpen? I make sure I always put a litter box in. I always put cardboard boxes. Leaves them a great place to hide. It's cheap, recyclable. They can chew on it like rats like to chew. This is what's called a snuffle mat. Basically, I can hide treats in it, and it encourages them to natural behaviors that they would do in the wild. I have huts like this. I have paper towels so they can kind of chew it. I have sheets and old towels sitting here. I also have little tubes like this, and then I keep their food and water in here as well. Also the running wheels, and I have little toys. Really, it's just whatever you can think of. You can make a lot of the things by hand, as toilet paper rolls and cardboard in general are great things to utilize. I would like to make a video in the future of me making rat enrichment toys and things like that. If that's something you're interested in, just let me know in the comments. It's getting dark, so I'm gonna try to wrap this up, but the next thing that someone had asked me is it hard to train rats? And I would say overall, no, probably not. From what I have seen from many other people who take the time to do it, rats are very smart. It depends on what you're trying to train them, but most of the time they're very food motivated and they're very intelligent. So training them to do some very basic things like spinning in circles, hopping over some obstacles, those really just take them following the food most of the time. Now, where I struggled is I just hardly had the time to really dedicate to doing that. And I had some stubborn rats, and since I'm still kind of new to having them, I didn't really worry about it too much. I did get my last rats to do one trick, and that was to spin in a circle for treats. I couldn't get them to do it all the time. I had to sit there for a good 30, 45 minutes to an hour of getting them to do it, where by the end they would get the hang of it. But if I came back the next day and did the trick, they'd have to kind of learn it all over again. And that's just where I knew that just if I took a lot more time to do it, they would pick up on it. Not that I don't think that they could have done it. It was just more about my own commitment. So I would say in general, I do not think it's hard. Rats are very smart, and it really depends what you're trying to train them to do and your time commitment. There are some rats that probably are going to be a little bit more stubborn than others, but they also learn from each other, so the others will kind of pick up on it as well. Now, Zinc and Domino, even though Domino was food motivated, they were not down for doing any of the tricks I could get them to do. They were very lazy and stubborn. But Algernon and Havarti, I could get them to do the spins, where I would spin my hand and get them to do it for the treats, and oftentimes I could also get them to spin on the wheel. I tried to get them to use the wheel by using treats, and so I would reward them every time they did a run on the wheel, and they did that for a little bit too. Hi guys, I had to cut the recording short yesterday. The sun was setting. I figured we'd pick back up where we left off. Now, getting back into our rat discussion, let's go over what we've already covered. Talked about why rats, what got me into them, how to prepare for new rats, how to choose new rats, rat personalities, rat training. Next on our list is basic rat behaviors and how to know when your rat is happy, stressed, all of that jazz. So some things I learned in the husbandry field is that many animals are very good about hiding their pain and distress. Rats and mice in particular, it may be hard to know when they're really hurting until it's too late. One thing that's very common for rats to do whenever they're sick or stressed out is their eyes will go really squinty, be a little bit more hunched, and if they're really in a bad condition, they may not move very well, may not eat or take food very often, and especially grooming. Despite common belief, rats are actually very clean. A grooming rat is a healthy rat. They'll often lick their fur, clean their tail, their feet, and after you get done holding them, they'll go right back to cleaning themselves then too. And they'll groom each other as well. That's how you know that they're getting along, they're taking care of each other, and many times, a sick rat, if they're too sick to help themselves, other rats may help them keep in shape, and that's the most adorable thing. So I'm going to kind of combine this section with what you should kind of know and be prepared for when it's end of life for your little rat. You should be aware that rodents do not live very long. Their max lifespan is about 3 years, and many of them may only live to be around 2. My rats, for instance, I only had a few of them for about 1.5 years before many of them passed away. Actually, it was this year that I lost all 4 of my rats, and in the beginning of the year, I lost 3 of them month after month. Now, Havarti passed first. It was a bit of a freak accident. We don't really know what happened with him. He was fine one day, and the next day he hurt his foot. We don't know if he fell or just had a strange condition. We took him into the vet, and they couldn't find anything on the x-rays. They couldn't determine what it was. They suspected maybe a hidden cancer. All we knew was that his foot was locked. He could not bend it or move it. It was as if his foot was frozen in place. We hoped it would heal. We gave him medicine, antibiotics, and it just did not get better. And by the end, he was just in so much pain that he didn't make it. It was unfortunate, really, because I still don't really know what happened with it. The vets still don't really know what happened with it. But I take some comfort in knowing that he was approaching old age anyway. And then Zinc genuinely fell into an old age cycle. He started wasting. And if you don't really know what that is, it's kind of like when your body just cannot take on nutrients anymore. He was not really eating much, and what he did eat, he couldn't keep on the weight. He just kept losing weight. He started getting slower, and basically it was just like watching an old person get old and pass away. And that's really just what happened with him. I felt really bad about it though, because it really felt like he wasn't really ready to go, in the sense that his mind still seemed young. He still seemed to want to do things. Him and Havarti both, they're both very independent toward the end of their life. They still wanted to do whatever they wanted to do. Part of why I think Havarti's foot never got better is because he would not rest on it. He wanted to just continue being a rat and living his life. And then a month after that, we lost Algernon. Algernon, we joked all the time that he was going to outlive all the others by a long shot, and then literally like 2 weeks later, he had a stroke. This is what we believe to be a stroke, because he was always moving around and all curious and everything, and then the next minute it was like he could barely walk. He was spinning in circles when we'd put him on the ground. He was tumbling over on himself. At some point he could barely move. I might have mentioned him and Domino were the last two, and they always tussled for Alpha in the cage. But at the end of the day, they loved each other. They cuddled each other and slept with each other. Domino was my biggest rat, Algernon was my smallest, but whenever Algernon could no longer move anymore, it kind of became a problem when they would sleep together, because Domino, his big old fat self, would fall asleep on top of Algernon, and Algernon hardly, as I said, the only squeaker we have is Domino, and he never squeaked until Domino sat on him, and then he couldn't get up. He couldn't get himself out from under Domino, so there was a few times I had to help him and get Domino off of him, because Domino didn't know better. He was just trying to cuddle up to his buddy like he always does. But then you get to a point when you have to think about their quality of life, and you need to be prepared for that day when you have to make a decision for them. They can't care for themselves anymore. Zinc and Havarti passed naturally, but Algernon, I could tell, he still had a young body, but his just mind and everything wasn't there. So we unfortunately had to make the decision to take him to the vet and euthanize him, and that was really hard. I always said I would never do that. I could never see myself doing that. Thought it would be too hard for me, and I mean, it was really. But once you get in this position when you actually have these pets and you see them every day and you see them all lively every day, it becomes to be more painful when you see that they can't do the things that they used to anymore, and you're practically having to hand feed them everything, and then they won't eat, and you're just watching them suffer, and you don't want that for your pet. So I have real sympathy for those that have a difficult time with that, but you don't really know what you do until you're really in that position, you know? So getting back into that, some symptoms we noticed with Algernon and how we suspected he had a stroke was, as I said, his movement was off. You know, as I said, he was really curious, full of life, and the next thing you know, it was like he bonked his head and he couldn't do anything anymore. It was almost a very obvious, I saw it and I was like, yeah, that's what it is. But I am also not surprised. As I mentioned, Algernon came off as a runt to me, so I think genuinely something was kind of wrong with him from the day he was born, and I think it just finally caught up with him in the end. I always suspected it was neurological anyway because of the way he walked, so as I said, it just didn't surprise me to see that happen for him at the end. Now, Domino also unfortunately passed away. We had to euthanize him about a week ago. He had been fighting a cancerous tumor-like thing for at least 3 months. It started in his cheek. It was a simple abscess. The vet removed the big tumor that was hiding behind the abscess. We thought it was good and gone. Then it shows back up again. Keep showing back up. It didn't really seem to spread anywhere else, so we couldn't really tell what it was except just a tumor. I mean, rats are very prone to tumors and cancerous. It just really sucked. We were really hoping the first cauterizing of the tumor would have gotten rid of it, but it just didn't. It kept coming back, and the second time it came back, his face really never healed. He was walking around with an open wound in his cheek all the time. Antibiotics were not working. Surgery was not working, and he was at an age where anesthesia was becoming dangerous. Whenever rats get that old, there's a chance when you put them under anesthesia that they just won't wake up. And after about the third, maybe fourth time we took him, our vet was like, yeah, if I do any more, we may just risk him dying right here on the table. And so I tried to wait it out, hoping it would get better, and it just never did. And unfortunately, I think that's why he never really got along with these new guys, because we got these new guys basically around the time Algernon passed away, and at that same time, Domino was dealing with his cheek issue, and it just never went away. That can be very stressful on a rat. Domino was always on edge. His back was always furled up. At the end, he became really squinty. It became very painful for him on this one side. He would have really squinty eye where the cheek pain was, and then a wide eye over here, and you could tell it was just really affecting him. And the vet couldn't do anymore. They were going to risk cutting too far, hitting an artery because of where it was placed. And because of that, he could no longer eat hard food. I think it became very painful for him. And I think the infection eventually spread to his lungs. And toward the end, he was really not in a good place. So we could not stand to see him like that anymore. It was really painful. And it's a shame, because I know that he could have lived a lot longer had that not come up. But it's something you have to be prepared for whenever you get these guys. Short little lives. But I wouldn't have it any other way. Do you have anything to say? To the viewers? Yeah. Now, when it comes to more positive rat behaviors, let's kind of end this little section on a happy note. Rats, whenever they're very happy or content, relaxed, you may see them, what's called bruxing is when they kind of chitter their teeth together, they're grinding them together. And that can mean two things. Bruxing on its own could mean stress, but you have to pay attention to other factors. What does their face look like? Are they squinty-eyed? Is their back fur all spiky? Are they kind of hunched up on edge? Whenever you go to reach for them, do they get all skittish? Do they not want to be around you? That usually would mean a more negative take, but bruxing can also be very positive. And bruxing is often paired with what's called boggling. That's whenever they're bruxing so hard that they cause their eyes to boggle out of their head. There's many videos of this online. I'll try to include one of my own here. It can be a little freaky at first if you don't know what it is, but once you get used to them and a rat boggles for the first time, it's like the sweetest thing. It's like, yes, I feel like they finally accept me as one, I had the privilege of all of my first 4 rats doing that at least once with me. These guys are still a bit new. They haven't quite warmed up to me yet, but I'm confident I can win them over. But bruxing and boggling is kind of like a self-soothing method for them. Also, some rats are known to enjoy what's called rat tickling. That's whenever you kind of simulate play with them by pretending that your hand is another rat. I am a certified rat tickler myself. Often this is a lot easier to do on very young rats. That's when you can get them most acclimated to you. It's a lot more difficult on older rats. I have never been able to actually get many of my rats to participate because a lot of them were a bit older. As I said, my boys were a little bit more reserved when I first got them. They weren't like mean or anything. They just kind of were like, leave me alone. I want my own space. And that's fine. And these guys, I think I have a chance with them, but I haven't really had a lot of time lately to sit down and try it. Basically, what you want to do, if I can attempt to demonstrate it here, I don't know if this will work. You will simulate play with them. Like you'll want to tickle them on the back of the neck and chase them around the cage. This obviously is not the best place to do that, but normally whenever you do that, you'll kind of pretend to be another rat, ease your hand under them, right? And then that's whenever you'll like flip them on their back and tickle, 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 flip them, tickle, 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 tickle. And whenever you do this in a cage setting where it's like a little bit more of a running around space, you'll kind of test it first. You'll kind of chase them around with your hand, tickle them on the nape, and see how they respond. If they kind of play back and follow your hand back around, sniff it, that means they're okay with it. If they completely run away to the corner and hide, they're not really down. So it kind of takes a little bit of that to get them used to just your hand. And once you go further, as I said, you'll start to slowly get your hand under their belly. And that kind of simulates how like rats tumble play. Whenever you get them on their back, some rats may take that as a more dominant action, like, oh, when you pin them on their back, that's you saying like, I'm the big dog. If they're like Domino, he was very uptight. He didn't really understand jokes or playing around. He didn't mean to, but I think he was like trying to give me warning nibbles and he bit me too hard. And the way I punish my rats for that kind of thing is I will deprive them of treats for a little bit. So I went a week giving the other rats treats and not him. Normally they also say sometimes whenever they do that, you want to squeak when they do that to you, because that's how they communicate. And so I did squeak at him at the time he had done it. I deprived him of treats for a little bit, and as I said, Domino's very food motivated, so he did not like that one bit. But I think he got the point after that. It very much read to me as a, I'm not going to hurt you anymore. I didn't mean to hurt you the first time, but I'm not going to play anymore because I don't like it, And that's fine. Not all rats do. Rather than engaging and trying to assert himself on me, I think he realized that he can't do that with me. He was not going to fight me about it, but he also wasn't going to engage, and that's okay. As I said, I worked in husbandry before, and the rats I worked with there, some rats really love it. And if you can really get a rat to engage with you in it, they'll actually laugh, and you can't really hear the laugh. There's been research where they amplify the sounds a rat makes whenever they're being tickled, and it's kind of like very, very high-pitched, squeaky, giggly sound that you can't really hear with your own ears, and that's always cute. So rat tickling is another neat way to give your rat enrichment. So another common question I get is, what is the difference between rats and mice? Well, I will say on the surface it doesn't seem like very much. One is notably the size. Rats are a lot bigger than mice. I personally think rats are smarter. I can't say if research necessarily backs that up, but having both of them, I find it is easier to train rats, and it seems a lot easier for them to remember people, things that they've seen before. So in a sense, maybe they aren't necessarily smarter, but they just have a different way of communicating their intelligence and actually interacting with people. They're a lot more social with people, I think, than other animals than mice are. Mice are kind of in their own world, doing their own thing, but rats kind of have a little bit more curiosity for the species that are unlike to them. There are many people I know who have rats, whose rats get along well with their dogs. Mice, I think if I remember correctly, mice also have longer tails compared to the length of their body than rats do. Just like rats, mice come in many different coat colors, many different strains. I think mice are actually a lot more used in laboratories, so the strain variety is way higher based on how more widely used they are in research. Another behavior that you might see in your rats, especially if they're albino, you might kind of see them do this swaying thing. Albino rats are partially blind because of their red eyes, so they cannot see very well. And whenever they do this, that's just them trying to kind of gauge their perspective and surroundings. That's really just them just trying to see. Now, another difference between mice and rats that I've gathered is rats are very, very, very social. They always recommend if you're going to get a pet rat, you want to get more than one, at least 2. I have 4 because I think that's a good amount, but they say never to have a single rat unless you're willing to spend so much of your time with it, because they can get very lonely and depressed. They are very social creatures. I think they would even prefer being around a rat they don't like than being alone most of the time. Males can get along very well if they're raised right together. They get acclimated well to each other. If they're neutered, I think from what I've heard, females can be a little bit more feisty when it comes to the groups that they're in. I have not actually owned females myself, so I cannot speak from experience on that, but I do know a lot of females still like to be in groups as well. Mice, however, you almost never want to have more than one male mouse. This is because male mice are very aggressive. I have seen my fair share of male mice killing each other over territory. Many of them will attack the hindquarters, or they'll go for the genitals. Nobody wants that. They always recommend if you're going to get mice, if you're going to get males, get 1. You might be able to get away with 2 if they're raised together. That could be very individual dependent, but just better safe than sorry. Prepare that you may only be able to have 1. Females, I had 5. They all live together. They all love to bury each other and cuddle together. They were great. They were the sweetest little mice. Female mice are where it's at. Male rats are where it's at. So that is where I would say, if you're going to think about getting them as pets, that's kind of how I gauge it. Both species seem to be very food motivated, very curious, can climb. Mice and rats can fit into any space that their head can fit in. That's how much they can squeeze their body down to get into place. The mice are definitely faster. They have a lot more higher energy because of their smaller body size, but their lifespans are about the same. I think mice are a little bit more prone to other diseases and ailments than some rats are, but overall I think it's kind of about the same, and they both have a pretty high rate of getting cancers and tumors. In conclusion, what I can say about my overall experience owning rats is I think it's one of the best things I ever did. My rats have been there through some tough times, some life changes. It's funny actually, because 10 years ago I came across an Etsy post where people were making rat hammocks and cute little cuddly things for their rats. And I was like, people own pet rats? Weird. Couldn't be me. And here I am. I kind of like the challenge of having a new pet for the first time. Teach you a lot about commitment, care, and unconditional love. It's very interesting just from a scientific perspective to just learn about the species as a whole, but also when you learn to care for something else, the way that I've had to care for these rats, you learn a lot about yourself. You learn a lot about the things that you can handle and put up with, and they prepare you for even bigger things in life and bigger responsibilities. As much as people may not realize it, having pets does in a way prepare you for having children later in life, dealing with children, dealing with other people, older people, because they're completely dependent and reliant on you. And as sad as it is that rats have such a short lifespan, they pass so quickly. It takes a toll on me a lot, it really does, but I wouldn't change it for the world, because I think being able to have something in your life that you care for so much enough to grieve for them is a beautiful thing. It's a blessing really to know love and loss like this. They can't speak to me. They can't say they love me. Who knows? They probably will never really care for me the way that I care for them. But every now and then you get what's called a soul rat or a heart rat, and they become very special to you. They hold a very special place in your heart. What I really want to stress is that when you get a pet, you have to see them as more than just a comfort for you. They're a whole other being that you're taking care of, and you have to be willing to accept that responsibility. Now, rats, they're not a lot of work. I would recommend them to anyone who's trying to see if they can handle having bigger pets. I took everything in a baby step, and I will never feel bad about that because I think it was worth it. Alright guys, that's really all I have for you today. If I forgot anything, if you have any more questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below and I'll follow up. If you like this video and want to see more, feel free to like, subscribe, and share the video around, and I'll be around.